Are you a turnkey rental property investor, or you're wanting to become a turnkey rental property investor, and you're trying to figure out A, what market to invest in, and B, which turnkey provider to go with? So this video is very specific to turnkeys, and you'll see why as we go. And it actually presents one of the biggest advantages, I think, to turnkey rental properties. But I'm not going to let that cat out of the bag yet. We'll get there. Okay, so here's my caveat for this video. In thinking of choosing a market and a turnkey provider, there are so many topics about this that we could cover. How to vet a turnkey provider, where to get the detailed analysis for a market, what all should be included in that detailed analysis for a market, how do you do market analysis? There are a lot of things in this question, and I think that's why this question becomes so difficult for people. So this video specifically is not going to dive into those more detailed answers because I think it's incredibly important to take a step backwards and look at this from a bigger picture perspective. I want to introduce to you a concept that is specific to market analysis and provider analysis, but mostly market analysis when it comes to turnkey rental properties. I started to talk about this, or I did talk about this, just not in as much detail, in another video that I made called How to Choose a Turnkey Market. I will link that video down below so you can check that out. But that is like I said, less detailed version of what we're going to go through right now. So this is a high-level conceptual perspective that I want you to consider long before you start doing detailed market analysis. I'll have separate videos and all those things, but I want to start here because I think it's incredibly important, primarily to make your life easier, but also to help you in either getting more accurate data or avoiding getting inaccurate data and swamping yourself with stuff you just don't really know about, and it doesn't allow you to get a property because you're so bombarded with it. So I drew a diagram on a whiteboard, and for the record, for an engineer or a former engineer, drawing on a whiteboard is incredibly stressful because I couldn't make all my lines perfectly straight or even. It was a very humbling process, but I think it's very important to give you a visual of what I want to present to you. So possibly harder than drawing on a whiteboard is figuring out how to hold this whiteboard up on a video camera. But I'm going to hide half of this diagram because I don't want you looking at it yet. So let's see if I can actually make this happen. Hey, I did pretty good. There we go. Okay, so let me know, give me a thumbs up if this feels familiar to you. You start at the top in looking at crime and school stats. And in my picture, there's a triangle. You can see that that is the widest part because there's so much information. Crime stats are endless, school stats, school grades. It's not even just that the amount of information is endless, it's that the possible interpretations are endless. So that is that biggest block of the triangle. I don't know why, honestly, but it seems like the very first place that anybody starts in market analysis is with the crime stats, and then followed quickly by the school stats. Okay, not a problem. Those are important, but it seems like that's where people start, which is why it's at number 2. Following the arrows, this seems to be the path people use to try to figure out which market to buy a turnkey in and which provider to buy the property through. So they start at crime and schools, they get all this data, they analyze all that kind of stuff. Then the question is like the jobs in the industry. Is there enough jobs to support population growth? Are people moving to this area? Are they leaving this area? Jobs in industry are a huge factor in market analysis because they matter. They drive the population. If one major industry goes out, is it going to tank a whole city? Ask Michigan about that when the automobile industry went belly up years ago. So jobs in industry are really important. So people start with the crime in schools, they move down to jobs in industry, still getting a bunch of data that they may or may not really know how to interpret, or they're having a hard time finding that data in the first place. Then they're interested, well, is this a cash flow market or an appreciation market? Cash flow is pretty easy to determine. You just run the numbers and you can see if it's high cash flow or not. But appreciation potential is where people are like, wait a minute, I want to know the appreciation potential. How do I find that? Spoiler alert, at the end of this video, which is going to be encouragement to stick around, at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a couple key places to get that kind of information because I know it's burning and you want to know those answers. Also, too, if you're following me so far and you can relate to this process, we'll call it the overwhelming process, hit that thumbs up. Let's hear about it. From cash flow and appreciation, so probably you figured out the cash flow answer, you probably didn't find the appreciation answer, and now you're just asking people, how do I determine the appreciation rates in various markets? Then you're talking about, you're trying to find your way to a market. So you've been doing all of these things in attempt to point you towards a market. This is very similar to if you're going non-turnkey. You start from nothing and you try to find these little details. It's almost like little pieces of food that lead you to the market you should be investing in or the neighborhood you should invest in. So people are looking at these three things in hopes that they will, at the end of that road, it'll present some market options. Okay, cool, right on. After that, the ultimate goal, the final step in the whole puzzle to buy a turnkey is to choose your turnkey provider. After that, yes, it's how to choose which property, but for all intents and purposes for this video, let's just assume once you get to a provider in a market you feel good about, things work themselves out from there. That's another video. I'll hit on how to choose the right property. But for now, the end goal is choosing your turnkey provider. Does this look familiar? You start with all sorts of abstract information in attempt to drive down towards your answer. So your answer becomes apparent to you. Does that feel accurate? Now, here's my proposal. I'm going to start to show you the other part of this. This is, where's my hand over here? This is the direction we're talking about. My proposal to you is to reverse this. Yeah, see what I did there? Exactly the same topics, exactly the same information. And here's where that hidden benefit of turnkeys comes in because it allows you to do this. Okay, let's recap. You want to find the market to invest in and the provider in which you think you should invest in. Cool. Like I said, there's a million details about how to vet particular providers and all that. We're not worrying about that for this video. Instead of starting with a bunch of just gazillion statistics that you really don't know how to interpret and trying to help make that point you towards your answer, I suggest making your life so much easier. Because turnkey providers only exist in certain markets, why not start there? So instead of starting with crimes in schools, look at this in terms of finding this direction. Where's my hand? This direction is having all the stats tell you the answer. Instead of doing it that way, what if you start with all the possible answers and all you do is verify that they're okay? Let me expand on that. There are only so many turnkey providers to work with, and there are only so many turnkey markets to invest in. Their turnkey providers are not everywhere. They can't be. So because cash flow is required, all sorts of requirements are required, they only exist in so many places. Let's say they exist in 10 locations. And in those 10 turnkey markets, there are 2 turnkey providers per market. So you have 20 turnkey providers. Start there. 20 turnkey providers probably sounds like a lot, but that is a lot less than 50 states worth of crime statistics. See where I'm going with this? Start with the pool smaller. And if you look at this triangle, instead of going big to small, start with small to big. Meaning, instead of having the statistics dictate where you buy and who you buy through, let those statistics verify what you're buying. So a quick little background on turnkey providers. For the most part, most of them are legit. They may range on like the customer service spectrum or whatever. And yes, there have been some bad turnkey providers, but it's not the majority of them. And as far as the turnkey markets go, it's the same thing. So the markets that turnkey providers are in, for the most part, have already been vetted by the turnkey providers themselves, by the investors buying in them, by the people who are supporting these. Yeah, some markets are going to offer different things other than others. There were many turnkey providers in Detroit, and there are a lot of arguments back in the day why you should not invest in Detroit. But for the most part, it's a pretty safe assumption to assume that a turnkey provider and a turnkey market are okay. You're not trying to counter a possible scam. They're not out for scamming, most of them. Assume that where they are and who they are is okay. Start there. If that's the case, I'm gonna put this down for a minute because my hand hurts. If that's the case, let's say you have these 20 turnkey providers in front of you and 10 possible markets. Ignoring all else, don't worry yet about crime stats, don't worry about any of that kind of stuff. Just look at those combinations and see if any jump out at you. Different markets and different providers are going to offer different things. Maybe some are cash flow heavy, maybe some are new construction, maybe some are urban type of properties, some are suburban type of properties. Maybe you like the Midwest over the Southeast, whatever. Narrow that list down first. So you have, and these are hypothetical numbers. You have 20 turnkey providers across 10 different markets. Rule out whichever ones you just don't like. You just don't like their properties, they're ugly, who knows, too expensive, too cheap, whatever. Rule those out. So let's say now you're down to, I don't know, 5 turnkey providers across 3 different markets. Again, I'm just making these numbers up as I go. That is a really small pool to now have to deal with versus these gigantic pools. So let's say you narrow that down. You're now down to 5 different providers across 3 different markets. So, oops, wrong one. Provider market. Okay, cool. You started with a narrow pool and now you've narrowed it further. Now you're super narrow. Now, one of the biggest questions is, are you more concerned about cash flow or appreciation potential? Well, you should know that answer for yourself. And when you do know that, then you can further narrow down your provider and market list. So like right now, it's March of 2021, Jacksonville is one of the biggest appreciation potential markets possible, but the cash flow is lower because it's new construction properties. If you only care about cash flow or the new construction properties are too expensive, cross that one off the list. Or opposite, maybe you are interested in the appreciation potential and you do feel better with a new construction property. Keep those on the list. So what we're doing here is we're whittling down, we're narrowing down our options. So let's say now, after this cash flow and appreciation thing, you're down to 2 different providers in 2 different markets. See how much easier this is than, whoops, big to low or big to small? Now that you've done this, I should actually draw a line here. I'm going to get another marker because this is important. Right here. Oh, of course, I picked the one marker you can't see. Let me get something a little brighter here. These 3 things, in my mind, help you determine which provider and market you want to focus on. These 2 things are more about verification. These 2 things aren't necessarily dictating which market and provider you choose. They're instead, you just want to confirm that you're not making a bad decision. So instead of having crimes in schools dictate your path, figure out your path on your own and then just confirm that these things are all okay. So where Detroit would have fallen short in, I don't know, 2012, I can't speak to it today, is Detroit would have looked good for these top 3. It's like, okay, great, I get a really cheap property, great cash flow, there's providers there. Market seems, it's a hot market. You may have very well stopped at the jobs and industry section that's like, wait a minute, why is everyone moving out of Detroit? Because all the jobs left. So that would have stopped you in your tracks. Or let's say you are, this is a little bit more specific to specific neighborhoods more than it is a bigger market. This is kind of like macro market, micro market, big, small. Crime in schools, maybe you found a provider you like in a solid market, but they have properties in a couple different kinds of neighborhoods. Well, maybe you research the schools and the school's the worst school on the planet and the crime is through the roof. Well, stop you dead in your tracks. I hope you guys are following this. Do you see the difference? The moral of this story is turnkeys allow you to reverse the process. If you are brand new in investing, and quite frankly, I'm a decade in, and I still think market analysis is very hard. Instead of starting trying to figure out a bunch of things that you don't understand in the first place, why not start by assuming that these things are okay? We're not going to take anyone's word for it. We're going to verify it. Don't panic. Assume that they're okay and just verify them. I can't even tell you the difference in the time of that process. So again, this is not the answer to how to thoroughly vet a turnkey provider, how to do a full market analysis. It's not the answers to any of that. I'm going to really regret if I erase this and then I have to draw it again, but I want to write something on here for you. Everyone get a last look? Let's see. Here's my personal recommended version. Here's what it seems like 95% of people do, the pink one. Okay, so while I'm going to finish talking, like I promised you, I'm going to give you a couple resources because I know you're just itching to do market analysis, and I'm going to give you a couple resources to help you start that. Again, that is not the intention of this video. The intention of this video is to give you that broad picture perspective on how you can more easily figure out which turnkey market to buy in and turnkey provider to work with. Like I said, it's March of 2021. Inventory is incredibly low, incredibly low. So guess what? Your pool is even more narrow than it normally would be. You might have 3 turnkey markets to start with and like 3 providers max. That's, again, hypothetical numbers, but 7 years ago, you would have had a huge pool of providers and markets as options. We have so few options right now because of the foreclosure moratoriums from 2020 that you don't have that many to pick from. So just start with what you do have and work down from there. So a couple sources. So if you want to start verifying markets that you're interested in or learning more stats about them, I'm going to give you 2 links or names, and both of these I'm going to link in the description. And more importantly, in the description, when I give you these links, I'm going to give you much more specific links than I'm writing here. These are just the general websites, so you know where to start. But I'm going to link you to a couple very detailed and amazing resources that can help you. The first one is, I can't write as fast as I can talk. The first one is, are you in suspense yet? I know this has to be exciting. First one I want you to go to is the Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA.gov. The second one is the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS.gov. The thing that I like that I'm going to link you to from the Federal Housing Finance Agency is a very detailed historical document of all of the appreciation trends of all the major markets. So, and this has, like I said, historical data, everything. And that is where you can start to kind of see these numbers. Where are these people getting this? How are they saying, oh, Jacksonville is one of the top appreciating markets? Well, guess what? People aren't making it up. It's in here. This is like federal documentation. So it's in here. And the second one that I like is the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. What this is going to help with is job trends. What industry? The thing I'm going to link you to is the unemployment numbers. You can get employment numbers, unemployment numbers. Those 2 things alone are huge for market analysis. The reason that I'm not diving into more deep market analysis in this video is because there's not really one spot that answers your question of where should I buy. First of all, everyone's criteria is different. Second, all of this information is located in different spots. So that's what market analysts do, is they gather all of that data and they interpret it and they give it to you. But I know you're sitting over there and you're like, well, I don't want to just take someone's word for something. Cool. And you shouldn't. But because you don't want to take their word for it, you then have to kind of moonlight as a market analyst, an analyst. And most of us are not that skilled at that. So the best you can do is really kind of start with the high level stuff. Okay, that was my little like extra bonus for this video. Again, this is a preliminary, get you started. I will have future videos on more detailed things, but in the comments, based on everything I said, first of all, give a thumbs up if all of this made sense to you and you're digging it. Second, I want you to leave comments on now, what are your follow-up questions? What information do you want in further analyzing markets and vetting providers? What are those specific questions that you have? Because I will answer them. So hit me up in the comments. By the way, make sure you're subscribed to my site because I do want to talk about all things turnkey, and I really want to give you guys all the information that you've always been wondering about. So make sure you subscribe so when new videos come out every week, you will get those. So I hope this was helpful just to get you started in a easier way of thinking about turnkey market and provider analysis.